Okay, yeah, so you're going to learn a little bit about me today, boy, I'll tell you. I love bugs. Bugs are like so cool, they're so fascinating. And a lot of people just think they're creepy and crawly and crunchy and that kind of stuff, and they just, don't want to deal with them. But since I was a little kid, I was the one going out in the backyard, turning over the rocks and the stones and putting things in jars, and my room was full of jars of stuff, which my mom didn't appreciate very much. And my grandmothers appreciated even less, especially when I started collecting things like the black widow, which I thought was the greatest thing on the planet. So I'll tell you about that when I get to the black widow part. But when I was a kid, I looked at a praying mantid, and I'll show you one in a minute. And it looked back at me, and I thought, what is it thinking? And so for me, what excited me was, I wanted to know insect behavior, and that became my expertise at UC Riverside when I learned entomology. Went through the college there, and both undergraduate and graduate as a degree in entomology, which is just, it was fascinating. And so now I am a scientist, and I was able to grow with the scientists at the Department of Entomology for a very long time, which I'm going to tell you this flatly. At this point in my career, which it's nearing the end, has disappointed me emphatically. I just, now that I have published a lot of papers and worked with a lot of scientists and so on, the agenda-driven science that's going on at this point in my career is so disappointing. And that is why most of the universities, including the University of California right at this moment, is requiring all of us to take ethics training in order to do science right and to be ethical about your science. Well, I know the scientists and I see what's going on. The ethics is lacking very, very, very significantly. And I can give you a lot of examples, and I'm not going to bother you with that. Here's another thing you're going to find out as I speak. My pet peeve is everybody else's pet peeves. So when they have a pet peeve, that's something that I kind of get off on pretty tough. And I'm also rather idealistic, and that is that I consider science to be pretty, it should be ethical and it should be the leading edge of things. So when you go to a scientist or a university, you should get the straight skinny and not any kind of agenda or bias. And that's the biggest thing, is when you do science, there should be no bias. It should come at it from the perspective of a high school experiment. You want a hypothesis, you test it, and then what are the results? But that's not the way things are going on right at the moment. And it used to be like that. I mean, other people did it in the past, but now it's like a job to do first, here's what I think, so I will prove what I think. And that's what's going on. I'm very, very disappointed in that. And what I'm saying to you is you've got to be incredibly critical and skeptical about a lot of what you see, especially things that are not coming from the universities. Because in time, my colleagues will debunk or deflate some of the lousy science that's out there, but it takes years. And by the time it takes all those years, the layman will believe what the other folks are saying. And it's done. It's over. It's on the internet. Everybody believes it. And it doesn't matter if it's debunked or not. So there was a study, and hopefully you've seen this recently. I mean, everybody on the planet thought, well, a cell phone, you put it up to your ear, you're going to get brain cancer. You put it on your butt, you're going to get butt cancer. I don't know, what else? But they've proved it wrong. And they did 40,000 people for 30 years. And the facts aren't there. But right now, I'm confident there are an awful lot of people that believe emphatically that you put the cell phone up to your ear, you're going to get cancer. And it's not true. So anyway, okay. You're going to hear a lot of pet peeves, well, I'll tell you. And I wanted to bring my Master Gardener shirt. You guys should be proud of it. It's really cool. I got my Master Gardener badge, which is really cool. And then, of course, I got coffee on it immediately. Anybody else would normally do? And hopefully you're going to enjoy the lab part. We're going to set up a lot of microscopes, and this is a time to really ask the questions. You're going to look at things that you probably wouldn't normally see because they're so small. And then lots of examples. I brought some of my pets. Yes, I'm an entomologist, so an entomologist has to have bugs as pets. I have a whole number of things, but some of them are just in their egg stage, which is really disappointing. I wanted to bring my walking sticks to you today, which I have 2 species of walking sticks that are really cool. And they're all in egg stages, and so I can't get it. Oh well, that's life. But I brought some of my cockroach pets, which I'm sure many of you have seen in Scott's office. And of course, my tarantula. My black widow died. My black widow was about 4 years old, so she was really old. And finally, she just stopped eating no matter what I could give her. So she just died of old age, which is really cool. And so that you know, I'm going to harp on this when I get to it about the black widow and so on. They are not as dangerous as as everybody makes them out to be. And I think that's really a sad thing, because when I was a kid, to catch my first black widow when I came from Wisconsin to California was a real chore, because I thought this thing was going to grab me and drag me down the road. And instead, that thing was so afraid of me, I couldn't catch it. And so, I mean, I spent hours trying to catch it in the middle of its web, and it just wouldn't do it, because the moment I would make any sound, a light, or touch a web, bang, it's gone. Why? Everything else eats it, because it's full of protein. And yet, it's afraid of people and mice and other animals because they eat the black widows. And yet, we think that they're going to, we're not going to have any children because they're all going to be dead from black widows. I'm really serious. Get working out here right now, because I don't want any black widows in the house. Well, I was rearing them. I'll never forget this. I'm rearing them in the house because it's cool to watch them lay their eggs and the eggs hatch. And there's hundreds that come out, the little babies. And then there was this one time where they got up into our vent system and they were little babies in the house. It was awesome. There were little tiny webs going everywhere. Yeah, so that was cool. Really cool. You know, about 8 or 10 spiders all making webs up and down from the lamp to the table. And Lisa's going, my wife's going, what in the world is that? I said, oh, it's just some of the black widows that got out. Everything will be fine. So my wife, I have to, she puts up with a heck of a lot of stuff in my house. It's amazing. So finally, my pets went from the house and even our bedroom to the garage, so now she's okay with it now at this point. Anyway, all right, so with that as kind of an introduction, yes, I only have, I am unusual, but I'm not as unusual as taxonomists. So we're going to talk today. I don't know where the best place to stand is here. Okay. Make sure this works. Okay, the wonderful world of insects. Now they are wonderful, and hopefully on some of the microscopes, when you look at some of these insects, if you look closely at some of them, they have some of the most spectacular colors that you will ever see on the planet. And you don't see them because they're so small. It's a fly, it's ugly. Well, okay, you put the fly's face up to the scope and all of a sudden you see silvers and brilliant whites and blacks and contrasting colors. And iridescent colors, even down at the tiniest levels. It's amazing, amazing. So I hope you appreciate that. So I love it. And this is the praying mantis, of course, right off the bat. So I looked at me, it looked at me, I looked at it, and I'm wondering what the world is thinking, and I scared it, and it threw its wings up, and I'll show you that too. Very cool. And I wanted one for a pet, of course. So anyway, here's what I'm going to talk about today. And I will zoom through some of this. I am going to talk about taxonomy because you do need to know why we separate the insects from the other animals, and especially the ones that are closely related. We are going to talk about the insects, and after we talk about taxonomy in general, we'll break it down and we'll only talk about the insects and what makes them unique and fun. And lastly, I'm going to go through the orders. And the reason why I have that last is that if the time runs out, that is the least important part of the presentation. But I want you to know about all the different kinds of insects that you could come in contact with wherever you go, camping or over to Europe and so on, other kinds of insects you might see. If you go to the Arctic one day, and I'll show you the kind of insect you'd see in the Arctic. And so I'll zoom through those, and if there's, at some point as I go through those, I'll stop and I'll talk about ones that are very, that are a pest, that are basically the most common pests that you'll find. I'll stop at those and I'll talk about those specifically. All right, so let's talk about taxonomy. Now, taxonomy is more or less a personal thing, meaning that one taxonomist in the United States will disagree with one in Europe, but and they both can't be right. So there's an argument about who we're going to follow. And what I mean by that is that I can say there's 32 orders of insects, but if you talk to one scientist in Delaware, he'll say, no, sorry, there's 33. And if you talk to somebody in Europe, nope, sorry, there's 30. And it's because they take certain insects and group them or just, separate them. And just recently, the one that's driving me crazy because of the way I learned it, the ambrosia beetles, the ones like the Pulvigus shot hole borer that's becoming a real serious problem in San Diego and other places, it has been grouped into the bark beetle group. And I look at the bark beetles as being very unique and different in the way they feed and so on. And morphologically, they're even different, but not to the taxonomists. So the other thing about taxonomy that's going on is that morphologically is the way most things were categorized in the past. And in the very beginning, with Linnaeus and others, it was morphology. Morphology means the way it looks and all the parts of it and the way it looks. So number of leg segments or antennal segments, that kinds of things are a big deal. But now it's gone into the genomic world. So the genomes are the biggest thing. The very first genome that was developed was from an insect, and that was Drosophila. The Drosophila was the first one that had all of the entire code of the DNA from one end to the other that was described. And from there, we've done an incredible amount of medical things that have occurred. And I mean, right now, gene splicing and stuff is a big deal. But taxonomically, we can separate the insects. Even if they look morphologically the same, we can tell that they're actually different species. So that's a big deal. All right, so taxonomy simply means how we separate things. And we don't call something that's an arthropod that has an exoskeleton. We don't relate that to a mouse that has fur, and their backbones and their nerve cords are all different. And so we need to separate them that way. And a quick cute story is the supervisors here in San Diego, and I won't put any names out there so I don't get in trouble. I always get in trouble with some things. I love to tell the little stories, but they're true. One of the supervisors in San Diego, the subject of cockroaches came up, and sometimes the big buildings in Sonoma got cockroach infestations, and they're pretty nasty. And one of the supervisors just stopped the whole thing and said, what are we talking about cockroaches for? They're not even animals. And so I'm thinking, all right, let's see, it's not a mushroom and it's not a plant. I wonder what it could be if it's not an animal, So in other words, there's a lot of layman ignorance out there about the taxonomy of the creatures on our planet. And so anyway, very cool. We need Peter Rabbit's mom to tell us. Okay, so scientific classification, so that's classification. Let me start getting into it a little bit. The first thing is the etymology of entomology. So quite simply, whenever you see ology at the end of a word, it means a study of. So that's the study of, and you can biology, zoology, you go down the list, herpetology, they're all the study of, and then the front part of the word is what they're studying. So entomology is the study of insects, or the actual thing is that it's notched or cut in. This means cut in or notched. And so you can think about the joints of the insect or the abdomen that has slots for the segments to come together. Well, that's cut in. And so that's basically what they're talking about there in the Latin sense. So the study of. Secondly, now we have the animal kingdom, and this has changed like crazy. I'm not going to go through the changes. You can learn them every year, and they'll be different as far as I'm concerned, especially with the genomics now being brought into it. So I'm going to really harp on the invertebrates, but we also have the vertebrates phylum. These are the phylum. So you have the animal kingdom, and again, this has changed too. The verbiage or the taxonomy and some of the larger things has changed as well. The animal kingdom, the invertebrates, the vertebrates. The vertebrates are those that have a backbone, and then the invertebrates, they don't, and we'll talk about a little bit of that as we go. There are more than 8, but here are 8 of the invertebrate phyla. The sponges, the jellyfish, the flatworms, roundworms, the snails and slugs, starfish, the annelids, which are the segmented worms, leeches, and earthworms, and then the arthropods. And that's where we're going to concentrate our time on. It's just the arthropod part, which are inverts. So the animal kingdom, the phyla Arthropoda, or arthropods. Okay? That's what we're going to concentrate on. So now here we're going to go into the phylum Arthropoda, the arthropods. Now, if you think about this, again, the Latin thing, poda means legs, so pod or poda means legs. So you're going to get a lot of that if you see different words like that with pod at the end. It means a leg. And then the first word it will describe it. So we have the insect spiders, crayfish, and millipedes, and others in the arthropods. And the way I kind of affectionately call them are the creepy, crawly, crunchy things. Okay? That way everybody knows what they are. The body is composed of ring-like segments, jointed appendages, an exoskeleton, bilateral symmetry. Hopefully you know what that means. You split a person down, their mirror image on one side versus the other. All animals that have bilateral symmetry are like that. And starfish do not. Starfish have 5, so you can't get a bilateral symmetry out of a starfish. And then a ventral nerve cord. We have a backbone and our nerve cords on our back. Their nerve cords on their stomach. And a dorsal heart, meaning the dorsal meaning the back, so their heart's on their back. So that's opposite of us. Okay? And exoskeleton's huge. Now I didn't have time to spread all this out because I brought a lot of stuff to show you, of course. Is just a little teeny bit of my collection. And I drag this one around everywhere. This goes to schools and camps and all kinds of things. But it's to point out that, when they're dead, they look like they did when they were alive. Unless the domestic beetle gets in here, and then they don't look so good anymore. The domestic beetles eat dead bugs. And so they're a real issue at museums, the domestic beetles, the little beetles. Carpet beetles, some people call them, and so on too. Because carpets typically, in the past, were made out of animal materials, not synthetics. So they eat the carpet too. And you'll still find them. We still find them in our house. They're very common. But the point is that they have an exoskeleton. So we have an endoskeleton, an inside skeleton. When we die, what's left are our bones. When they die, what's left is what they look like when they were alive. And we can put them in collections and show them off to everybody. Telling them here's what they look like when they were alive, like the monarch and things like that. And obviously when my pets get old and they pass away, they end up in my collection as well. So I have a lot of things that I'll spread out here by the time it'll take for the break. And I wanted to get a couple of them out here right away. And this one is about to fall apart. I always have to glue it back together. This is a real horseshoe crab from South Carolina. And they're very cool. But it's a crab, so it has 10 legs, and it has an exoskeleton. So in order for them to grow, they have to shed their skin to grow. And insects have to shed their skin to grow. So do millipedes and centipedes and so on. So shedding their skin to grow is a huge deal. You can come up and take a look at this later on when we break up and take a break there. And then I'll show you these other models that I have and so on as I go along. See if there's something else I can get out of here. Oh yeah, there's a lot I can get out of here. And so anyway, we'll get to some of these things. Here we go. Thank you. Another table. Yeah, I need another table to spread this stuff out because we got a lot of stuff. All right. Okay, so we can go back to the slides for thank you. Let's see who's doing the lights again. Oh, it's behind. Okay. All right. Okay, so anyway, so here's another way to separate things and classify things is what I was describing here, bilateral symmetry and so on. So now we're going down into the insect world. So this is one of the inside a phylum, the phylum Arthropods. This is the class Insecta. So after you get the kingdom and phylum, you end up with the class. So here we have the class of insects, Insecta. This used to be called class Hexapoda. Remember what I said about pod or pod? It's leg. Hex, 6 legs. Well, they took that away. I don't know why. It makes sense to me. So instead they call it class Insecta. And I'm sure that there'll be another taxonomist in another 10 years who'll say, let's move it back to Hexapoda again. All right, so we're going to skip the subclass and division are not very important. And so these are for taxonomists, but we're going to go right down into the order. There's, like I said, about 32 orders of insects. This order is Diptera is the flies, or the flies. And so I'll get to those later on. But what I've done here is giving you the full taxonomy of one insect, and that is the housefly. So the family is Mussidae. So in the under orders there are families. So when you take entomology, you learn families. And the families, this Mussidae means like the housefly. So the genus is Musca, and the species is Domestica. So the whole name, the scientific name is Musca domestica, and they put an L after that, and that's because you always want to describe the author, or state the author that described the organism. And Linnaeus was the first one to get out there, and he just described just tons and tons of things from all over the world. And by just writing it down on paper and describing it, he's the first one to describe it, so he's typically listed as just an L with a period. And that's because everybody knows if it's an L, it means Linnaeus. He's been described this. But almost all the insects now have a full name behind it, like Mackenzie or Arnold or that, and so on. And those are literally the taxonomists that took the time to morphologically describe it into the scientific literature. So, kingdom, phylum, class, Insecta. Then the order is the flies, Diptera. The family is Mussidae. The genus is Musca, species Domestica. And the species, you use the genus and species name together when you state the species of the organism. Just as you've seen on some of the, with the plants. All right. Now this is the most important thing, is that every insect has to have 6 legs. So if it doesn't have 6 legs, it's not an insect. So for instance, the centipede, a lot of people would consider it a bug, but it's not. It has more than 6 legs. And the centipede actually has 2 legs per body segment. And the millipede, so the centipede is predaceous, and they have a set of venom glands in their first pair of legs. So they're venomous and they eat their predators. And a millipede is a plant feeder, or they eat detritus, or decaying plant matter, so they're more or less harmless. They have 4 legs per body segment. Pretty simple way of separating them, no matter if they're flat or whatever. Okay, and then you have the spider, which has 8 legs. I just showed you the crab that has 10. Scorpions have 10, and so on. If it doesn't have 6 legs, it's not an insect. It's as simple as that. And if you look at caterpillars, and I'll just give you this one quick example. I know most of you have seen the great big green caterpillar on tomato plants, the hornworm caterpillar. It's huge over time. If you look at their body, and it looks like there's 8 or 10 legs, 12 legs, 15 legs on the thing, all crawling up and down the plant, and they're really tough to pull off the plant because all these legs are holding on. Well, they're not really legs. They're called prolegs because they're not true legs. If you look at the first 3 segments of that caterpillar, you'll see what real legs look like, and they have 6 legs. So take a look at that when you get a chance. All right. They have to have 3 body parts. So there's only 2. And the head and thorax is fused on a spider. Okay, things like that. So there's only 2 on the spider. Same with most of the other organisms. They only have 2 body parts and not 3. So that's unique. So if they have 3 body parts, a head, the thorax, and the abdomen, they're an insect. Okay? And then lastly, many insects, not every insect flies. Okay? So there are wingless insects, like the giant hissing cockroaches. They are wingless. But if they have wings and they're creepy, crawly, crunchy, it's a bug. So can you imagine if spiders could fly? No. Wouldn't that be cool? I think it'd be cool, but not a lot of other people think that way. I know, when I do even if with the cockroaches, if I do a classroom, and I'm going to do one next week or the week after that, typically the kids are up there excited and they're all bug-eyed, and the teacher's at the back of the door. So if I drop a cockroach, she's gone. Right around the corner or whatever. And the kids are all, can I pick it up? Can I pick it up? Not all of them, but some of them are, or whatever. This can be interactive too, by the way. Go ahead, question.
So what I was just asking Jose, I'm curious what makes some of us do exactly what you said the teacher does. Like you see this spider that appears to be a little bigger than normal, and it's like, ah, somebody come and get it. What do you know what that's about?
I think that I think a lot of people have problems. No, I'm kidding. I honestly, and I'm really serious about this, I think it's, until, when you have the passion like I have, and you grab, you observe, you watch, and you see how they're so afraid of us. Even things you wouldn't think are afraid of us, really, because they're food for so many other organisms. They don't want to come and get us unless they're like the Africanized bee, they're protecting their hive. Even honeybees will protect their hive. But I think it's the fact that they have claws and they can grab you and hold you, and people wouldn't like to have something grab you and hold you, and then potential for biting even though they won't. So it's just a fear until somebody actually does it. So when I let people hold a cockroach, it's always oh, this is cool. Until that experience happens, it's creepy crawly, and it's just an unnatural fear, but it is a fear. So it's a thing to break. So if I can catch young ladies before 4th grade, piece of cake. After 4th grade, there is no way on this planet they're going to hold a cockroach anymore. But before that, you do it, then they'll start going to fairs and things, and hey, I'll hold one of those, because they've had the experience one time before 4th grade. I've been doing this for 35 years. I'm really serious that about 4th grade, and that's about it.
So there's no hope for me then?
You're done. It's over. Yeah. But I can still work on you. I got them right here. All right, so anyway. The millipede, 4 legs per body segment, not harmful really at all. They can emit a tiny amount of, it's kind of an acid, but it's not going to harm you. It'll form a little tiny brown stain on your skin, but it's not going to harm you whatsoever. And that is to ward off birds from eating them, because they'd be a favorite food source if they didn't. But I've held these. They used to rear these, and we used to have them for show when we go to classrooms and things. And the USDA decided they could be an agricultural pest, so never mind. And I look at that and go, I am familiar with them too. I mean, they only eat things like piles of rhinoceros poop. So the fact that they'd be in the United States and become an agricultural pest to me is like stupid. But I'm not an ag commissioner or whatever. All right, then there's a centipede. Now I wouldn't hold one of these. Now why? And now they're afraid of us, and they want to get out of there because they are full of protein, and a lot of animals like to eat them. But every leg is made to catch their prey, so they can poke you, and then they have a venom in their bite, and they're like aggressive. So no, I wouldn't want to hold one of those things. Some of the bigger ones are not as aggressive because nothing harms them. But these guys can be nasty. This one cannot. Now this is a centipede. This is called the house centipede. And I get these all the time. And the way I get them is teachers, I know a lot of teachers and so on because my wife is a teacher, but I would get them in a little styrofoam cup, and what it would be the body and about 100 legs lying on the bottom of the cup. And that's because they drop their legs when they're threatened. So if you go like this at them, bang, they'll drop 8-10 legs and run away. And all those legs are going like this to attract attention to stay away from the centipede. Because they want to get away because they're food for so many organisms. And so the teachers are bringing them in thinking, again, they're going to drag my students down the drain and have them for dinner. And I'm telling them, these things are so afraid of you, you shouldn't worry about them. They're actually getting rid of the soft-bodied bad bugs in the classroom. So don't go get orkin. You're going to cause more problems by spraying to try to control them. You will upset the system rather than help it. Yes?
So you mentioned they're called house centipedes.
Yes.
They're outside in the yard also, right?
Yes, they are.
I've seen them in my yard, but never in the house, my God.
Yeah, they're very commonly on the walls. They're very good at getting through small spaces, and this is worldwide, and they're found so often in like mobile homes and trailer parks, or not trailer parks, but office trailers and things like that. So trailers that you put in school grounds and things like that too, that they call it the house centipede. So it just ended up with that as a common name.
And they don't sting like the other centipedes.
Don't bite, don't sting, not going to harm you at all. Put it in your hand, squeeze it, whatever. It's just going to drop a bunch of legs in your hand, that's all. Yeah, it's harmless, really. There's a couple of species around the world that are really big, which is kind of cool. Yeah, question?
Well, they can't be centipedes if they drop their legs. They become octopedes or...
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I like that. That's a good idea. Yeah, octopedes. Yeah, septipedes. Yeah. You betcha. Now you guys. This is cool. This is when I first came to California, I caught one of these and I went, "This is the most unique organism I've ever seen. This can't be something everybody knows about." And then I asked my colleagues, and they all went, "Oh, they're everywhere." This is called the sun spider, the solipugid, the camel spider. It's got a lot of names. They have huge jaws. Oops. Huge jaws. And there's all 8 eyes are right there. They have 10 legs. Their first pair of legs end up in a little ball down here, and this is a sensing vibration, so they can touch the sand and feel crickets or cockroaches that are in the sand and grab them out and feed on them. They are also absolutely full of protein, and so every organism wants to eat them. And so they're always running away. So when you see them in the living room, and this happens in my house a lot, he's running through the living room, and my wife is leaving the room, of course. But you know what? You know why it's running? It's afraid to death of you. Thinks you're going to eat it. And yet they're really good to have around because they're eating the soft-bodied caterpillars and things in your yard, whatever they can find. They're good guys. But most people look at it and go, "I don't care, it's ugly, and I want it dead. I want to get working and get rid of it." But no venom, no tail, no sting. Yes?
Is this related to the wind scorpion?
Yeah, same thing. Well, okay, no, sorry. The wind scorpion or the whip scorpions, there's different common names for these things. They do call this the wind scorpion, but there's actually a real wind scorpion that's
Out in the
different.
desert?
Yes.
Okay.
And so that's just a conflict in names.
Okay.
But don't worry about that. That's okay. So sun spider, sun scorpion, wind scorpion, yes, camel spider. There's a lot of names for this guy. And this is the one in Iraq. So here's the guy holding it. You can see his cuff right here in Iraq. And you know the soldiers over there don't always have a lot to do, so they have camel spider wars. And so this one, here's a camel spider biting the butt of the other camel spider. Yeah. Isn't that a bummer? Yeah, I would have kept them both as pets, not just one. All right, anyway, I have a scorpion. Now the scorpion's really cool. I'm not sure if I have this, so I'm going to do this right now. I'm not sure I have it on my slideshow. So here's a black emperor scorpion, just a piece of it, okay? And I used to have these as pets. These are so friendly. I mean, you can pick them right up. I've given them to kids in classrooms and stuff. They don't sting. If they're bothered, they pinch with their pincher, but they don't sting. But they have phosphorus in their shell. So right now it's black. But if I take an ultraviolet light and put it on the black, this is what it looks like at nighttime if you take a black light and take it out into the desert. You can find scorpions like this. This one is the black one. It turns a kind of a blue-green. And then I have another one here. There it is. This one should be a little yellower, but they turn a bright green when you put an ultraviolet light on them. Now this is unique. There are, in this animal world, there are some incredible things that you just wouldn't believe. You know, but that's the only arthropod, the only exoskeleton organism that has phosphorus in its shell and reflects ultraviolet light. That's just amazing. Yeah?
Is that all scorpions?
All scorpions. But not sun spiders, and not whip scorpions, not wind spiders or wind scorpions. None of them do that. Only the scorpions do. All right, so unique, very cool. And then there's this is cool. So when I was a kid, I used to catch the teeniest little Jumping spiders. These are your friends. They eat the white flies off your tomatoes, and they're great to have in a garden. They're awesome. But to me, it's like a pet. So, you know, at the house we have a little puppy, and the little puppy has a fuzzy little face, beady little eyes, and sharp little fangs. They love to bite my skin and make me bleed, okay? That's a puppy. Well, look, it's just like a puppy. Beady little eyes, all 8 of them, and fuzzy little face, and sharp little fangs. He is cute. Yeah. You look, I think it's really cool. Oh, isn't he great? Okay, so this is the golden orb weaver. These are a little bigger than the jumping spiders. This one's huge. And, but they're beautiful. And I know none of you would do this, but I do this. You can get right down to them, this close to them, and they won't move, won't do a thing in their web, because they want to eat a moth. They don't care about you. And if you touch the web, they're going to run away. They go up to their corners. But this thing here, this color is unbelievable, and especially if you see them in the sun. It's iridescent, black and yellow and silver or white. It is just beautiful. But I know a lot of you aren't going to get this close to one because you're going to think it's going to jump on your face and be like the alien, and that's not going to happen. And yeah, my wife won't do it either. I keep saying, get right down there and take a look, it's amazing. But anyway, these are good guys. They're getting rid of grasshoppers and moths and things. The moths are laying eggs on your petunias at night, and it's catching the moths. They're good to have around. This is called the cross spider. So you can see the cross on its back here. This is an invasive. It doesn't belong in California, but it got here, of course. And Californians are going to regulate a good guy. And so they have proliferated. And these are the ones that make, in the fall, they're big. And they're orangish or brown. And they make their web at night. They'll do it in the evening. You see them off the eaves all the way down the bushes. And what's that?
Pumpkin spider.
Oh, some people call them a pumpkin spider, but there's other spiders that are like this as well. They're called the Arthropoda, which make the round web. And then in the morning, this species eats that web because it's a protein and digests it, and it's feeding itself. And then it will put the web up again the next night. So different species, some will do that, some won't. This species does.
That's still an orb weaver?
This is an orb weaver.
Yeah.
Orb weaver the Argyopes are the orb weavers. So it's you have the common name, scientific name. And this is the green lynx spider, another good one to have in the yard. They can get pretty good size, and I have a really nice, somebody have to install a picture on my presentation of when I took in my backyard holding a whole honeybee. It was an awesome photo. This was a big one. Here's another unique thing that you should know about this spider anyway. There's a lot of spiders and other organisms that do this. But anyway, the female, this is a male. You can tell a male and female by the pedipalps, how big they are. This is a male with big pedipalps. But the female is very large. At the end of the season in the fall, September, October, they lay an egg mass in their web. And they don't typically make a web. They're usually free running across your garden. But in the fall, they'll make a web, lay their egg mass. She stops eating. All she does is protect the egg mass. And then when the eggs hatch, the baby's first meal is mom. And that's how they survive. That's how they proliferate and keep their population going.
And that's how it
Too many ladies in the room. Maybe if there were a bunch of guys, they'd get a kick out of it. I don't think the ladies. And then they have the tarantulas. Very common. I brought one, and these are caught locally. They're in the backyards, so you can pick them up and totally harmless. They're really, really cool. They're not dangerous at all. I've never been bitten by one, and I've held many, I mean hundreds. And Tom Prentice at UC Riverside, good friend of mine, worked with him for many years. He was on National Geographic. They actually videotaped him with tarantula on his face and all that kind of stuff. He has held thousands and thousands of tarantulas. He looks at morphology and identifies species. And he's only been bitten once. And that was because he was trying to dig one out of the ground, and he was going like this, sweeping the dirt away, and he swept the female away, and she didn't like it, so she bit him. That was it. And they're pretty docile. And they have no enemies because they have what's called urticating hairs. So the back of their body, I know you've seen a lot of this where they have a bald spot on the back of their body. They're taking their back legs and flicking the hairs up into the air, and they float real well. and they get caught in your skin, or a bird's eyes or a coyote's nose, and they will never go near another tarantula ever again. And so they don't really have any predators except for the tarantula hawk, which I have in my other that's the only one that I'm aware of. That literally the giant spider wasp. There is a wasp for every spider on the planet, and the wasps will sting them to paralyze them, and then they lay their eggs on them, and the eggs hatch and eat them. And then they form a pupa, and they come out as a wasp in the next year or the same year. So spider wasps are very, very common, and the one for the tarantula is called the tarantula hawk. Yeah, did you have another
I
question?
was just going to say that's the only bug I'm actually afraid of. Because when I hike in Zion, I once had a lecture by an entomologist there who said the tarantula hawk's venom is meant to be one of the 2 or 3 most painful venoms ever tested on the pain scale or whatever.
Yeah.
So you need to go and be put on morphine for 3 days or something until it passes. Have you heard this?
No, and a lot of that is not true.
Are you dispelling that myth for me so I don't go like this while
Yes,
I'm
I'm dispelling that myth for you. Now, they do have a very strong venom, and it's because, I mean, they're hitting a huge organism, and they're trying to get them right in where the nerves are of the spider to immediately paralyze them, okay? But I don't know of anyone that's been stung, except the one guy who did that on purpose to get a pain thing. Well, the guy's a pansy, man, come on. He can't handle a little pain, come on. I mean, the thing is, those tarantula hawks only have one thing in mind: finding a tarantula. So if you're not a tarantula, you have nothing to fear from these at all. I have gotten so close to them. I have been face to face with them because I wanted to catch them or videotape them or whatever. They have zero interest in us. On the flowers, I go to the flowers, you go right up to them. They're only wanting the nectar or the pollen. They have nothing to do with us. So to think that they're going around chasing people and we're all going to be on morphine, that is, yes, I can debunk that immediately.
Thank you. You changed my life.
Yes.
I've had tarantulas crawl up my arms and my hair before, and yeah, sorry, and it doesn't concern me at all. But I would like to know more about how they actually bite. Why are people so concerned about them? I mean, they're really incredibly beautiful.
Yes, and I don't, again, it's the same question as the other young lady asked about the creepy, crawly, crunchy things that bother everybody. It's the same idea, except that this is a spider that has fangs. And
So it actually bites you.
okay, I can tell you how they bite because I've seen it, but not how it would bite. Okay, they actually flip their fangs up straight and they just run into you. That's how, they're not really biting you, they're protecting themselves. That's it. And so, if they were going to bite you, they would do it like they do with a grasshopper. They grab you with all 8 legs and when they do that with a grasshopper is immobile pretty quick. And they don't use their venom really. They're so big they crush their prey.
Wow.
So they don't really need the venom when they attack their prey. That's another reason why they don't bite or they don't inject the venom. And the venom that's not a poisonous venom to humans at all. By the way, all venoms, all right, that's wrong. Most venoms are proteins. And a protein is something that you and I digest. So if you ate a black widow into your stomach would digest that protein instantly. It would not make you sick even one whit. It would be a protein that your body would use for nourishment. If you get bit by one and it's in your bloodstream, that's a different story. Because now it's a nervous poison that goes to your nerves and you're going to get a reaction. There are other venoms that are not nervous poisons that eat the tissues like the brown widow and so on. But you see my point is that it's a protein and we'll digest it. It's not that dangerous. So the tarantula's venom, it's just not going to harm you at all. It's a protein that we can digest pretty quickly.
That's what they told me, but my husband and sons were like, out the road.
Yeah.
That's really interesting.
Pansies. Pansies. All right, sorry, go ahead.
Jim, are you saying that caught in a survival situation in the wild,
Okay.
you can eat any insect and it's protein?
She just asked if you're in the wild and that's all you've got to eat, can you eat any insect and it's protein and you can digest it? No. And the reason is that there are insects that have toxins in them, and if you ate some of the toxic insects, you would get sick or die. Some of the toxins are extreme, and it's because some of these insects eat plants that are very toxic to us, and then that toxin is in the insect, and then if you eat that insect, you're going to get sick. So not every insect is something you can eat, but the majority of them are. And in general, it's just like what you always see, the red and black insects are not so good. All of those are kind of, birds won't eat them, everything leaves them alone because they'll make them sick. The red and blacks are very, 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 very common bad sign.
In terms of the color, red or black?
Color, red and black colors, yes. And there are others that, I'm not going to get real specific, but it's not true about every insect. And there's a lot of else. All right. And then the black widow. So, okay. How many of you drove in a car to get here today? I'm surprised you're not screaming around scared to death because you got in a car. You know, there's something else in your garage that's incredibly killer deadly. Far more than the black widows. Anybody know? The lawnmower. It's true. Yeah, the lawnmower kills 70 people every year from lawnmower accidents. That's right. And I know that probably in this building or the next building, there's another deadly killer. It's called the vending machine. It's true. 8 people die every year from vending machines. You know how they're top heavy with the cokes and you shake them and they squish. And the guy's dead. Or they chase him down the house. All right, anyway. So how many people do you think die every year from the black widow bite?
None. 0.
Yeah? 1?
1.
Yeah, most of you are right. It's 0. Okay, how many do you think die every 5 years from a black widow bite?
0.
1. 0. How many every 10 years?
0.
Yeah, okay. Actually, unless I'm wrong, because it may have happened recently, the last one was 1989, I think it was. It's either 87 or 89 was a person dying from a black widow bite. But 45,000 people die every year from car accidents. 70 people die every year from lawnmowers. 8 people die every year from vending machines. You should be running down the hall screaming like the devil every time you see one. And yet, instead, we're deadly killer afraid of black widows. And at this point, you know, my friend Rick Vedder at UC Riverside, who I knew very well for many, many years, he reared black widows in little vials about this big, 400 of them, because he had to take them out one by one with his hands. He would just grab the thing out, because it's just a spider, and then put 2 electrodes on it, give it a millivolt shock, and it would go, and the black widow would put out a teeny bit of venom, and he'd put a little glass sliver next to it, and it would collect the venom. And they did that for years, and to try to make anti-venoms for the black widow, and it never worked. And it was too costly, and it was also, it made people sick anyway. And so what the doctors did, so he worked with Loma Linda University, and the doctors there, and the entomologists, and the herpetologists, the black widow venom, what are we going to do with this? Nothing. And so when people get bit by black widows, and I've known many, many people that have been bitten by black widows, they go to the hospital, they treat your symptoms until your body metabolizes the nerve poison, the protein. And your body will. And so it's not a threat unless you're very, very young, or you're very elderly, or you're sick. It's not going to harm you. And so we have not had deaths from black widows at all. So that's why my children rear black widows, and there's blue babies flying through the whole house, because I'm not afraid of them. And I don't control them around our house. And right now, my black widow died, and normally I bring one. And so I was going to go right out, because I know for a fact I could pick one up in no time. I know where they are, in my yard, and a brown widow too, so I can show you the difference between a black widow and brown widow, because they're all around my house, and yet I haven't lost a child yet. I mean, they're just not that much of a threat. They're not, and when you touch them, they run away. And the brown widow's in a little sack, it makes a little web area that you can't even put your fingers on. You're not even touching the brown widow when you're touching it inside that little hammock, they call it, in the web. So they're just not as dangerous as people make them out to be. And yet orkin, most people just don't believe me. I'm going to get orkin out here, and there aren't going to be any black widows. Well, you are going to have other pests then. Cockroaches and other beetles and other things. There was a question over here? Yes?
Just symptoms, because I'm sure I've been bit while gardening, and sometimes I'll get like, I feel like I've got the flu or I get body aches or something, and I think, well, maybe it's this bite, that I got. Maybe it was from being bit by a black widow, since we have a lot of them. Is that what you would expect to experience? No.
I am extremely confident that you've not been bitten by a black widow, especially if you're working in your garden. It is very unusual. It has to be an unusual situation for you to be bitten by a black widow. It is more, Rick Vitter, again, what he found out, and there's a published paper, you can go on UCR's website, UC Riverside, and he has got an entire website about black widows, brown widows, and the recluse spiders and all that. And what he found was that the most common thing that was going on was bacterial infections. And so when he worked with the Loma Linda University, again, to find out what the doctors were treating, the doctors were calling everything black widow bites, not knowing what caused the issue. So they were only treating a symptom and not knowing what the cause was, but calling it the brown recluse or the black widow when it was completely false. And so in your garden, you are more likely to come in contact with a bacteria, or even there are plants that can do this kind of thing. A lot of people, I'll tell you, a lot of people get heat stress, and then they think it's something that's bitten them in the garden, and it's literally, they need to drink some water. But there's 22 organisms that can cause the same kind of damage or the same kind of symptoms that a black widow can cause. So I would not always think it's the black widow out there, or even any spider. Just recently, and I think I was training in San Bernardino, the entomology, and they said, when I was a kid, I went through the bushes, and I came out and I had spider bites all over my chest, and I can tell you emphatically that was not spider bites. No way on the planet. It was more likely he had a reaction to the plants that he was running into in the chaparral, not spiders. And there are also stinging caterpillars that can do the same thing if you're going through the chaparral. You can get little red spots on an arm because you've brushed up against stinging caterpillars. Very common in Southern California. Oh, anyway, I can go on and on about that, but I've got to move just a little bit, and then I'll get some more questions here in just a sec. So it's perspective, ladies and gentlemen. Perspective. To most people, the black widow is deadly. To me, it's a pet. And not so dangerous. Okay? So this is perspective. All right. Beautiful crab spider in a lot of flowers.
Whoa.
There's the body, here's the thorax, and there's the eyes right there, and the legs are folded back. And you'll see in a minute when I talk about the insects that these will wrap their legs around a big bee or fly, something 2 or 3 times as big as a spider, and they bite it in its thorax, which has the largest brain of the insect is in the thorax, because that's where all the moving parts of the insect is, the wings and the legs, and it paralyzes it almost instantly. Because the bees and the flies, whatever's landing on the flower, is only thinking about the pollen or the nectar and not about the fact that it's being envenomated. Okay, so this is beautiful. On a yellow flower, it's yellow. On a white flower, it's white. So it changes its color to be cryptic with its background, so the bees and flies don't recognize that it's there. And I have seen very big ones and very small ones, and the smallest one in my yard a couple years ago had a whole honeybee that was probably 4 times bigger than the spider. And the spider was hanging from a web, and it had the whole honeybee, and it was spinning around in a circle. The bee was being envenomated, and it was just spinning around in a circle. But that spider was going to have a big meal for a long time when it was done. Okay, and so I said they were cryptic, and they can also be camouflaged. This is not an insect. Why? It doesn't have 6 legs. This one has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So it has 8 legs. It's a spider, and it's an ant mimic. And even, I mean, here's a look at that. That looks like an ant. And so even the eyes of the spider look like an ant. The pedipalps of the spider looks like the jaws of the ant. And the first pair of legs of the ant are folded up to look like the antenna. So here's what's fascinating. I told you I'd tell you some fascinating things. This thing will run along with the ants in its trail.
Wow.
And then they go down into the tunnel, and then they feed on the white larvae or pupae inside the colony. Now, here's the fascinating thing. Okay, so you know when ants are running in a trail, you see them and they bump into each other and they take their antenna and they touch each other, and then they move on. Well, scientifically and behaviorally, we found out that what they're doing is the antennae are full of chemical sensors, and they can tell the hydrocarbons on each other's shell. And what they can tell is what colony they came from. So if they're red ants bumping into each other, they can say, oh yeah, you're from our colony. If they're red ants bumping into each other, they can say, okay, you're a red ant, you're still cool, but you're from another queen, another colony. And so if it's a black ant, it's different. Well, you know about the different, you know, they have little awards. The black and the red ants can have awards depending on the species. But the thing is, they can tell whether they come from the same queen or not, okay? This is the cool thing. This spider is running in with all the other ants. The ants run into it, touch it, and think, this is an ant from one of my queen, from my colony. No matter which colony it's running with. That's amazing to me, just fascinating. And then they go down and feed on the young. That's pretty. So there's some really unusual things that are not explained real well. So I'm going to stop there and give us a break, and then I'm going to get into the insects. So you're welcome. I'm going to start spreading some of my stuff out, so you're welcome to come up and take a look.